Hello, everyone, and welcome back to Shock Talk. We have a wonderful episode planned for you today, and as you can see, sitting with me at the table, we have some new faces. So we'll go around the room and introduce everyone. We have Mark here to my left. Hello. He's been on the show before. He is our European sports touring car expert and also one of our engineers at BILSTEIN. Of course, you all know Shane. He's always here with me, my good buddy Shane. Can't do a podcast without him. And to my far right over here, guess who we have sitting over here? We have Nicole Johnson. And she is a very special guest, a very special lady. She has been a monster truck driver. She has been an Ultra 4 driver. She has been involved in European sports touring cars recently. She has her own show. What's the name of that show?
Nicole Johnson's Detour.
Nicole Johnson's Detour. So, since you are our guest today, there's so much I want to hear about from your life. But my first question is, how did you get started in this career path?
It probably started in the early 2000s. By then, my husband and I had two small boys, and he was the spotter for the Red Bull rock crawling team. And rock crawling at that time, which started in competition around 98-ish, he was the spotter, the guy outside the vehicle looking at the suspension, telling the driver which way to go, giving feedback. And by about early, 2004 maybe, somebody had asked me to drive at an all-women's rock crawling event. Hey, do you want to drive my vehicle in this event? And I'd never competed, but we went to Moab and we were always off-roading, four-wheeling in our Jeep, and we had an old Land Cruiser. And I happened to win that event, and it was sort of like the thing that kicked off the competition bug in me. It also happened to be the Women's National Rock Crawling Championships. So then you go, oh man, I can do this. You get this sort of false sense of like, this is easy, or like, I want to do more of this. So I started competing, and Chris Bolger, who works here at BILSTEIN, was with Pro Comp Tires at the time. And the Red Bull team was on Pro Comp Tires. I had Pro Comps on my 4-seat, 91 YJ. It was a Jeep that we would just throw the kids in the back and go play on rocks and stuff. And I remember saying to Chris at the time, what's it going to take to get a set of sticky tires? I wanted sticky Pro Comps to compete on because you got to run a whole season. I literally started professional motorsports because Chris told me I needed to do that to get
the tires. Yeah,
I did it for stickies.
Yeah.
So anyway, I started competing, and our vehicle was pretty outclassed, and I had never placed very well, better than 14th place. I got another vehicle. I said to my husband, I really want to take this serious. I'm going to need a more competitive chassis. So we got a Shannon Campbell chassis, and that car was so good. I mean, gosh, you could put the best, you could put Shannon in that car to clean up every weekend. But I started nipping at the heels of all the really talented drivers, and it was on the podium pretty frequently. And so I started getting more attention and magazine coverage. In 2008, Modern Marvels came out, and they filmed us on the rocks. The segment was called Dangerous Roads. And then we were the weirdos who chose the dangerous roads, right? So we started getting a lot of recognition in media, which helped build me a press kit. And one day I was walking around SEMA in 2010 looking to get into short course racing. I wanted to do Lucas Oil short course racing. I dabbled with a 1600cc, Volkswagen motor in a little single buggy, but I wanted to get into a class that was televised. So I'm running around SEMA looking for money, and then I bumped into Dennis Anderson, the driver and creator of Gravedigger. And at that time, I wasn't even really paying attention to monster trucks, though you couldn't help but know who he was. And he said, they're looking for female drivers. So I happened to be in the right place at the right time. He helped introduce me to the bosses at Monster Jam. And within 2 weeks of that conversation, I was sitting in a Gravedigger truck in North Carolina, test driving it. I'd never even seen a show. So they kind of, they've got a guy that shows you the ropes, and you do a whole shot. Okay, 1,500 horsepower.
Trial by fire now.
Yeah. You're just
there's
in
the gas pedal, there's the brake. Have fun.
Exactly. And so you're just in this truck, and they're like, hey, do a whole shot. Okay, so you're just holding the brake, come up on the torque converter a little, and he goes, when I drop my arm, go. And you only go like 15 feet. But can you press the throttle the entire 15 feet, or are you going to chicken out? Because it's a lot, and it's loud, and a lot of people will just startle themselves and lift. So I think because I survived that, I got a job. So
stand on the gas, you get a job.
Exactly. There was more to it, obviously, than that. But after a couple of days, they offered me a job, and then I went and did that for 6 years. It was just a whirlwind experience. And I'm skipping a lot of that, from early 2000s to that, some 2004 to 2010. I also was the first female to finish King of the Hammers. Raced it in 2008, 9, and 10. Finished twice in those years. The last time being a 10-hour and 47-minute experience. And I got out one time to pee.
What class?
This is before classes.
Oh,
This is before the word Ultra 4 existed.
Right.
So we are like really part of the first group. I raced in the very first 3 years of its existence. Right. The first year I went, there wasn't a spectator or a vendor.
We were people out in the rocks.
We were in the middle of the Means Dry Lake and just parked haphazardly wherever we were with our trailers and stuff, and then we just went out and ran a bunch of trails and with desert in between. And so it was kind of a weird concept at the time. And we helped sort of, I guess, that was sort of the beginning of what came out of that. Everybody started developing new technology, and we were just at the very beginning of all of that. That was kind of a run what you brung. Back then.
What was really cool about that time is a transition from like the moon buggy to the desert race.
Right.
And
like combination
for shock absorbers, it was like, but rock crawling, I was in this industry when rock crawling started, and Shannon Campbell had like the coilover cars, and then they switched over to these John Nelson moon buggies who invented like a bunch of desert race stuff, and then they invented this moon buggy. And but it was cool to see that transition back into like desert, and now like that's kind of what rock crawling is in a way. Like that's the more popular, like to be able to do fast in the desert, rock crawl up the hills. Like that was like to bridge that.
Right.
Is like, it's like almost impossible.
Yeah.
To put it into perspective, the first time I went out to the Hammers, we were in a 72 Toyota Land Cruiser on Leaf Springs. And it took us, I don't remember what tire size, but pretty small. It took us 12 hours to drive a 1 mile trail.
That's how it was when I started.
And then it's like 6 minutes.
Yeah.
When you start changing
it wasn't a race course then. The first time I went to King of the Hammers, it was with a Jeep club. And
it wasn't King of the Hammers.
Yeah, the challenge was to get the truck to the top, and it took us all day.
It was, you mean, you went to the Sledgehammer trail.
Yeah, exactly.
There was no King of the Hammers.
I might do one trail in a day, and 2 was ambitious.
Yeah.
So when they first said, hey, we want to run all the trails and throw a couple 100 miles of desert in, we're like, you're insane. You're insane. Okay, let's do that.
Yeah.
So, but to put it into
perspective,
invite
100,000 people now.
Right. My buggy, which was one of the very best built chassis for competition rock crawling in the pro modified class, I would argue that my car was probably the most capable one at the time.
Was it a moon buggy?
No. That was the unlimited class. I was in pro mod, which we ran the same courses, but we had to have 2 seats side by side, front engine, body panels, limited at 37-inch tires. So it was a harder class because we were running the same courses as unlimited. So I took that car and ran King of the Hammers on 2-inch air shocks and Dana 60s front and rear. Crazy how much it trashed you. It was.
And look at what they use today.
I would normally run this much up travel, just in my shock. And we had to just pump the air up on them and just go for it.
Hope it works.
It was horrible. I think I maxed out at about 50 miles an hour in the desert.
Yeah.
Because it was just out of control.
Yeah, the old days, the cars would have trouble at speed.
The air shocks were just not really made. Now I know why you were such a badass yesterday when we were testing the XP1000.
They were so comfortable. But yeah, it was fun. And so that was cool. By the time, so I raced 2008, 9, and 10. And then in 2010 is when I made the leap over to monster trucks. And so, yeah, I did that 6 years. Eventually you agree that you'd like to still move your neck as a grown up. So you leave and go do other things.
But during the 6 years, you actually won 1 or 2 or 3 or 4 championships. How many championships did you win?
No. So we would have events and stuff. I do. Okay. So the very first show I ever did was in Trenton, New Jersey in January of 2011. And I won racing my very first show, and I beat Gravedigger. It was single elimination. And I went on in that 12-week season to win racing 9 times in those 12 weeks. And they said that was the most amount of wins by a rookie or a female in a single season. So that's a kind of a cool thing to be able to say.
Fantastic.
I bet Dennis wasn't too happy about that either.
Right. It was all fun.
Right.
And it did help build a following for me. Eventually, within 2 years of starting that, I was the very first driver of the Scooby-Doo truck, which helped also build a fan base because it's such a recognizable brand. It's a Warner Brothers, product that everybody knows. And I don't know, I guess I always have to get to say I'm connected to that franchise, which is huge.
Well, you also made Scooby-Doo do a trick that nobody's ever done or had ever done before that time.
Yeah.
Scooby-Doo in a backflip. So describe that to me.
So 10 years ago in 2014, I was the first female to land the backflip in a monster truck. And at that time, there were a handful of guys that were doing it. And I'd never practiced it. What you saw was my very first attempt. I'd looked at the vehicles, I'd listened to the throttle, watched when they were braking. You could tell that they were, the wheels were still spinning as they were rotating. And then you could see when they must have been stabbing the brake. And so I just repeated what I saw and it worked. Hindsight, I could have probably rotated a little faster, entered a little sooner, but hey, for a first attempt, it worked. And I only did it one other time and didn't land it because I didn't come in very square and it kind of pirouetted in the air and crashed.
Oh.
So, for me, there's no monetary award. There's no trophy for doing that. There's just a lot of risk on the line.
Right.
Breaking a neck is a real risk. And I've seen somebody break their neck doing it. If you don't land it right, you could land with no suspension on your roof and really cause problems. Did it. Thank you. Bye. I wasn't one to continue to try to do it.
Right.
Now girls are doing it all the time and repeatedly every single show. Awesome. If that's, the beginning of what if I was the beginning of that, then cool.
Right.
But I never felt like I needed to go prove anything after that. Thank you. Check mark on the resume. Move on.
Yeah.
I know there's a driver that uses a dirt bike handlebar setup.
Oh, our buddy Frank
Yeah.
Scattini.
So I know as a kid, I always thought every monster truck had that setup, but it turns
Clutch,
out
brakes.
Yeah, it turns out that's not the case.
Yeah, Frank Scattini. I never competed against him. He's an independent. But our good friend Chris Bolger is who introduced me to Frank 20 years ago, and he sits there like in a motocross style setup with a weird harness leaning forward and handlebars. And everybody would ask me, "Is that how you guys sit?" No, we're just sitting in the center of a chassis,
stepping on pedals. Yeah.
And so he's the guy.
Yeah.
He's crazy.
So,
I guess he came from motorcycles.
I mean, is there a benefit to that setup, or do you know much about it?
I can't imagine.
Okay.
Because, how are you going to protect your neck? I've never driven like that. He's the only one. He's just a weirdo.
That's
we
crazy.
Love Frank.
That's
He's a total
crazy.
weirdo. Yeah. No, I'd rather be in a seat. But we were strapped in so tight, with a head and neck restraint. And we had ratcheting seat belts. So you could ratchet down your lap belts and all the way tight to your hip bones. And where I found out that if you tighten your belts down too early, your legs go numb in 10 minutes.
Right.
That's how tight you need to be.
Right.
So that your body doesn't move.
Right.
Your soft tissue better not have a lot of soft tissue. If you're a fluffy, then your bones are still going to move within your fat, you know what I mean? So like you hope that you're in there tight enough that you don't move, because you don't want your squishy stuff to act as suspension.
Exactly.
If that makes sense.
Yeah. No, it makes sense. Race car
tight
drivers
as you can down to your body frame.
have to be tight in the car.
Mm-hmm. And all the air out of your lungs. You're just pulling down your belts. You're just exhaling
tight.
and you think, okay, I'm going to die. I can't. If you can't breathe, you're in it.
That's
right.
good. Yeah.
But then adrenaline takes over and you kind of forget you're uncomfortable.
Yeah.
Yeah. And then the problem is, I was like a mouth breather. You know what I mean? At the time, like I would be sitting there with just no air in my lungs, as tight as I can, adrenaline, heart rate racing. You're only in the truck for like 2 minutes doing a freestyle.
Yeah.
You come out and you can't even swallow. You're just exhausted. And I don't know. It's just physically very demanding. And
so what's like a training regimen like for that type of career? Are you in the truck like 5 days a week, 3 days a week? Is it a lot of fitness stuff or?
No, I mean, at the time that I was doing that, I worked on cardio too, because if you if you had won your event, like if you won donuts or freestyle or racing or something or wheelies, you'd get out of the truck, talk on the microphone to the fans, and go essentially just give your trophy away to some little kid up in the stands. Well, you have to get up there. We'd have ladders. You have to climb up that. And then, I would go to the top.
Talk to people.
I would go all the way to the top because, okay, here's selfishly, I learned that I'd have more screen time. If I gave my trophy to the first kid I saw, that was less time on the Jumbotron.
Right.
But I learned I could build a fan base if I kind of milked that experience for a while.
The climb.
So I would run all the way up. And then I'd get this section to compete with that section and cheering and then go find some kids. So it probably helped build my fan base too, because I would really work that opportunity to be in front of the camera.
Right.
If that makes sense.
Right. No, it makes sense.
That's a huge crowd of the monster truck crowd.
I know. That's just crazy.
They're normally sold out. Usually, at least back in those days.
Yeah.
Right?
Yeah, it was
like a huge event.
What's weird is when you see yourself, in Dallas, the Jumbotron at the Dallas Cowboys Stadium in Arlington, actually, Texas, is like enormous. It's like 70 feet tall, and I don't even know how wide it is. But when you look up and you see yourself on that Jumbotron, and you have to address an audience that big, it's really cool. I mean, I've talked to 60, 80,000 people.
So sitting here is very easy, right?
Right.
Talking to us, that's super easy compared to the 60 or 80,000.
Right. I've had some really unique experiences, and I would argue that my resume is probably the only one in the world that has the same, the things that I've done.
Yeah.
I've just led a very
You've got a Wikipedia
interesting
page, so I mean,
right.
You've arrived.
I've just led an interesting life, and I'm grateful that I've had so many weird experiences. And Detour, my show, Nicole Johnson's Detour, is named that for a reason.
Right.
I've done all of these cool off-road things, which I only thought existed in the automotive planet at the time. I didn't realize all these other cool things were happening, like, air-cooled 911s, right? or hot rods and resto mods and just really neat things. And so now I'm detouring and exploring all these weird genres that I've never had a chance to experience before.
So that's the Detour show. You could pick up really any automotive segment and do that. So what are some of the ones that you've done recently that have been a lot of fun? So
a couple of weeks ago, it hasn't aired yet, but we were filming here in the LA area with two older BMW 2002s. I drove a 1972 and a 1974. And the 74 is outfitted with a more modern 1999 E36 engine, six-cylinder with a giant turbo.
Right.
It's a 2,000-pound car that makes 600 horsepower.
Ooh, that's good.
It was awesome. And we drove Angeles Crest. So that'll be a fun episode when it comes out. But, the flip side to that is the one before that, I was driving an old 1960 F-250 truck. So, with a Coyote in it, and it was great. Yeah. So more of a resto mod experience.
With a Coyote, there you go.
Looks kind of ratty on the outside with a patina that's a little rusty and wore out. It's got a Coyote underneath it. Yeah. So it's
the total sleeper.
Right. So totally different experience. But I think, if I do have to be honest with myself, I think our concept is very... has longevity because we will never run out of content.
Exactly.
We're not in one location we're not just filming in a garage that's our garage and you kind of see the same background every time we're on location somewhere.
Right.
And we will never run out of content ideas because we're always exploring new genres. And every time I release a video of a new genre, I'm going to pick up a few new viewers over here and a few new viewers over there. And we just haven't even... gotten there yet. We only have 36 videos.
It's untouched as far as the content that you can gather. Now, I guess Mark and yourself were at a show together recently. What was that show and how did that go?
Tell us.
So that was a Works reunion up in Monterey. Okay. So it's a big Porsche event.
All right.
Annual event. So that's where I met Nicole, and she brought her 78 and I live in SC. I think
this car has BILSTEINs on it?
Oh, yes.
Okay.
Better.
Did you get to go for a ride?
No, so it was on display.
Oh, so you couldn't take it out of the booth, right?
Yeah, but I guess it's a pretty interesting story if you want to kind of tell.
Yeah, tell us about the car.
How you found the car.
So
and what
I
you've done
picked
to
up that car in December. I had been looking on Craigslist because I can't afford bring-a-trailer prices. And I thought, man, the only place I could afford one is if somebody doesn't realize that something like bring-a-trailer is going to bring them more money. So I started looking on Craigslist and the photos were crap. The car was dirty. There was a picture of like the side of the of the seat, and it looked like there was a rip in it. Well, there wasn't a rip. There was a piece of plastic trim missing, the little lever to make the seat go forward.
Oh, had disappeared.
Right. So it looked like the car was in really bad shape in these photos, and they're just horrible photos. I decided to go look at it. It was local in Vegas. It was dirty, but it had been sitting there for a while. It wasn't running. But based on what the guy was telling us, we thought it was probably just a fuel pump issue and dirty fuel lines. So we bought the car, terrified. Got a good price on it, but it's still real money and a lot of money, and I'm not made of money. So it was a big risk on our, part. We didn't want a project. However, we thought if we just put in a new fuel pump and fuel lines and fuel filter, and if it will run, score. And it did. Took us a couple of weeks. My husband and I did it ourselves. We're pulling back carpet so he could access the tunnel. And there's just, I'm under the car. We have a little quick jack lift in the garage, and I'm under the car feeding fuel lines. We made the fuel lines and all the fittings ourselves because, kind of more expensive if you go to the dealer to buy those parts. So we tried to do everything on the cheap, and it fired up. It fired up, and we were like, oh my gosh, yes. And then the rest of it is just, been regular maintenance type stuff where you're realizing everything's tired. It had BILSTEINs on it, but they were tired, old, as you would expect after 45 years. You got to change those things.
Right.
So, of course, I'm going to put BILSTEINs on it. And we've got the B6 shocks on it now. Handles great. They were bottoming out before and leaking and just ready for a fresh set.
45 years old. Yes.
They made it 45 years. That's pretty good.
Yep. So put some new ones on there, and now it's great. It handles awesome. So yeah, in August, 8 months after owning the vehicle, I soloed it from Vegas to Monterey and back 1,200 miles with no air conditioning, and just drove up there to experience Car Week, and of course put it on display at Works for Me.
The car has a pretty unique look. Describe that. I saw some photos of it, but it's hard to describe it. It's almost like a safari look, or
I just threw a roof rack on it.
Yeah.
Because I wanted to bring a lot of shoes. And there's not a lot of cargo space. So I put a
room for shoes.
Yep. Put a Redline roof rack on the top, and actually put some waterproof Bills bags, which are meant for like kayaking and canoeing and stuff, and threw those on the roof. And I mean, it's just a
Who would have known it was a shoe rack? I thought it was something.
No, not a shoe rack, a roof rack.
A roof rack.
I guess it is a shoe rack now. But anyway, I just wanted to bring a lot of stuff with me.
Right.
I thought, I'm going to do this.
No, it was really cool.
It's petrol blue metallic. It's a great color.
It is a beautiful
color
car.
Is awesome.
Yeah. So is that the original paint?
No, but it's the original paint coat.
The original color, right.
It was painted when we got it, but it had been sitting outside dirty, and we just didn't know the condition. It had a lot of swirls in it, so we had it paint corrected. Put a little ceramic coating on it, threw some decals on it to emphasize my orange, like, Detour stripes for my show. And now it's got this really weird, recognizable look. We just kind of made it our own, and I threw a big meatball on the side with 814, and everybody's like, what's 814? August 14th is my anniversary with my husband, and that was always our team number. So appropriate that we just throw 814 on both of our Porsches. I have another Porsche too.
That's perfect.
That's super cool. So I guess what made you decide to go like the G-body or air-cooled route? Did you always want one, or? I drove
a couple of them for the show. In our first year, I drove a Safari 911, and man, was it fun. It was G-body. It did have a G50 gearbox.
So
an 87, I believe. Yeah. It was great. And the sound and the feel of that was really the first 911, except for the air-cooled car I was driving at short course. I hadn't driven a 911 before. And I really kept thinking about that. People would ask me what's your favorite car you'd ever driven? And in the first year or two, I kept going, man, that 911 was awesome. That was probably my favorite. And then I had a chance to work with Magnus Walker, and I drove his number 277 Porsche for the show.
Yep.
And Magnus is such a passionate guy. He's obsessed with Porsches and air-cooled Porsches. And I came away from that experience going, I got to get a Porsche. I mean, you cannot leave 2 days with Magnus without totally obsessing over 911s. And that's when I started looking on Craigslist.
Gotcha. So were you trying to target an SE, or were you just open to any G-body?
I was looking at 914s, which are not air-cooled. Yeah. I was looking at any kind of Porsche, 928s, 924s, anything I could get into, because I realized quickly I can't afford a 911. They are completely out of my price range. And it was honestly just the luckiest score that I could find one that wasn't working, that did reach into the price range that we could afford. Broken, but let's try it, you know? And so I honestly thought an air-cooled was out of reach. And that's why I was looking at others. There was a really great turbo 944 I was really heavily considering.
951.
Yeah.
Yeah, they're amazing.
Yeah.
I'm a big fan of the 944 chassis.
Yeah. And I just, ultimately when I found this car, we were like, we would be dumb to pass this up, because if it's what we think it is, if this is just a fuel problem, we've got this. We can do this. And we just feel really blessed that we found it, and found it locally.
Yeah.
It was insane.
That's pretty rare. Usually
Yeah.
driving across the country.
2 Porsches in the family now. Is there another one planned, or are we going to
No.
stay at 2?
Right now, I mean, I only have a 3-car garage, and it's got a bunch of tools in it.
Okay.
I basically have a machine shop in the garage. We have
Right.
a mill and a lathe, and you can squeeze 2 cars in there now, but you can't work on 2 cars. So we have to go move one. We have a storage unit that we keep the other one in
Right.
while we're working on one. So 2's good.
So the motor pool is full for right
Mm-hmm.
now, but the two are going to be the family for
Right.
until we find another one to replace one, or are we
Right. No, I
happy
mean-
with those?
Listen, to be honest, I actually have 4 cars. I have a 72 Toyota Land Cruiser, which we've had from the very beginning. From my husband bought it in probably 92. And I've got a 78 CJ5. And now I've got the 2 Porsches. So I don't have room for any others right now. We can't bring another one home.
Oh,
I'll get in
okay.
trouble. The
So-
HOA won't like it.
So what is the story about the Boxster that I'm being told to ask you about? What is this story
Boxster.
about?
The Boxster's fun. All right, so I got to go back up. It's this show.
Right.
Let me back up a little bit. A year and a half, almost 2 years ago, I met a guy named Mr. Cobra. His name's Lynn Park, but he's known as Mr. Cobra. He is the world's last living authority on the Shelby Cobra. As it turns out, he owns 20 of them.
Oh, geez.
Several of them are 11 are actual originals.
Right.
And I had an opportunity to drive the 10th Cobra ever produced, a 289. It started as a 260. It's a 289 Shelby Cobra. It had previously only been driven by Lynn, his 2 sons, and Carol Shelby. So I got to drive that car. We went up Angeles Crest. And I also got to drive his 427. So the 427 was only driven by him and Linda Vaughn, who was like really, you know, popular in the drag racing days of in the 70s and stuff. Big honor. After we released that episode, he said, if you really want to know what it's like to drive a Shelby Cobra, you need to drive one on the track. Come to Willow Springs with us in about 4 months. We're going to have the Cobra Owners Club. I'm like, did he just invite me to drive a Shelby Cobra at the racetrack?
Yeah, there we go.
So I got a Boxster primarily so I could be prepared for that experience. This was January of 23. And by May, I was going to be driving a Cobra on the track. So I picked up a Boxster. I needed to be ready. If he watches this, he'll find out I'd never driven on a track before that. I'd never driven on a track. So I started looking around and I found one dirt cheap, $8,000. It front end damage, who cares? The rest of it looked pretty straight. It had 68,000 miles on it. It's a bone stock 2.7. Great track car. So my husband threw away all the leather, stripped it, took all the, everything out of the doors, threw away the glass in the side doors and caged it, put a short shifter in it, put some wheels and tires and some BILSTEINs on there, BILSTEIN coilovers.
Right.
And now it's great.
So this was a training car for the Cobra track.
Yeah. I originally took it out with his stock suspension so I would at least have a baseline. I didn't want to go straight to coilover so I could have a comparison. Mm-hmm. And I was able to improve by 20 seconds.
Wow.
When at Big Willow, just by going over to the coilovers. Huge handling difference.
Now, I watched some of the content on this, and you learned about corner weighting and all of that during this process, or you had already had that knowledge?
I've been going through a process of modifying it every single time because I wanted to know I wanted to make one change at a time so I could understand what worked and what didn't work.
Yeah. Mm-hmm.
So I did put the BILSTEINs on. Were B16s back in April and took it out to the track. And at that time, I put some Tarot camber plates and some sway bars, adjustable sway bars.
Geometry back a little bit.
Right, trying to get some negative camber in there. But I was still rolling over to the outside of the tire because we were going so much faster. And so then a couple of weeks ago, in partnership with Terra Engineering and Eisenlohr Racing Products, put in some new lower control arms that have shim adjustment. And we were able to really affect camber and caster and toe and all of that and square up the chassis so I have 61-inch track width in the
Keep
rear.
it flat. Yep.
Widened it by 2 inches in the front from 59 to 61 inches. And now I've got 3.5 degrees of negative camber, and I took it out to the track about 2 weeks ago. It's awesome. Now I'm not rolling onto the outer edge of the tire.
It's
and
a
now,
slot car. Yeah.
Now it's keeping up with 911s and Caymans and Mustangs, and they're all coming up to me after. I mean, I'm on the straight and I'm only about halfway down the straight. They're entering turn 1, right? I've got half of a straight before I get to them. And by the time we're in turn 3, I'm on their butt. So it's great because it corners awesome.
Right.
And I've done nothing to the motor. I'm still learning. I'm not even like that fast of a driver, right? It's that the car can perform in a corner.
The car works now.
It works great. And they're all coming up to me afterwards. When would you do to that motor? I'm like, it's stock. But let me tell you about my suspension.
Yeah.
So now I've got a completely corner weighted, balanced, mid-engine car, and you don't need a lot of horsepower if you've got a great suspension.
Yeah.
As we found out yesterday on the Blackhawk shocks in the UTV, you don't need a lot of power. Suspension makes an amazing initial improvement to your vehicle. Everybody thinks you need horsepower, but if you can't control it in turns, it does nothing for you.
Or even as far as an off-road vehicle, control it in the straights over big bumps. I mean,
Sure.
So I was going to bring that up next. Is a great transition on your part there, but you got to get back to your off-road roots yesterday.
Yeah.
With Shane in the group out doing something fun. So let's hear about that.
Yeah. What were we doing?
Well, the day before you were what?
So
it was a great thing yesterday.
Yeah.
So yesterday we were in the desert. The day before I was traveling from Rhode Island, and the day previous to that I was judging the Audrain Newport Concours with a blazer on.
Busy week.
At the Vanderbilt Mansion. So I was all East Coast out, and looked. I had an 87-year-old Scottish judge as my co-judge, like it was this foo-foo event, right? Looking at $40 million cars.
Yeah. Which one's better?
Right.
Nicole showed me the pictures. I'm like, wow, that is like 100% opposite.
The juxtaposition of what I was doing
covered
within
in
a 3-day
dirt,
span.
riding around in basically factory built side by side.
Right. Sweating. It was hot. We were filthy.
106 degrees at that point.
So what was this event, Shane? Describe it a little bit.
We wanted to have like an intimate event where we invited some potential distributors from motorcycle shops and then shock tuners, and have like an intimate, like couple day event, like where we can just had a chance to ride in cars, and we had stock cars and modified cars, and did a few in before and afters. It wasn't like completely apples to apples during that time. And then went out for a ride. It was 113. I was definitely baked out by the time Nicole showed up. And I hadn't ridden it in a stock XP 1000 so far. And I knew it was going to be pretty brutal.
You had never been in one before?
Stock.
No, I'd only driven in the one with the BILSTEIN.
The modified one.
Yeah.
But anyways, I was just like, I know we're going to go down to this section of road, and it was just going to be, I was pretty exhausted, and I wasn't really in the mood to get tossed around. But
I tossed you around.
Yeah.
Nicole is a great driver. That was fantastic. But yeah, and you were pushing that car hard in the stock configuration, and it was...
We had pretty good size whoops and a
very good size.
Yeah, that's very rough
Polaris.
terrain down there.
Like if you are familiar with Ocotillo Wells along the side of the road, just what, 20, probably like 50 feet off the road where people are driving up and down, and they've been doing it since the beginning of time.
Yeah.
There's a very mature set of whoops.
Yeah.
So we went down there, and Nicole was just pushing that stock car through it. So anyways, we were going to do a whole loop planned out, but Nicole's like, let's go get the other car now. We just got tossed around.
This one's horrible. Let's switch out.
Yeah, we were right at what I perceived as the limit of that vehicle, while I could still comfortably think, oh, I'm under control.
And safely.
I didn't want to put us... I mean, I guess in a race environment, you would probably push it harder than that, but I'm also trying to not roll us over, and I just want to experience this. So we were just beat up, running through those whoops in a stock configuration with stock shocks on it. I could immediately feel it in my shoulders, my chest, everything, just violent. My sunglasses were falling down to the end of my nose, just bam, bam. And we were just hitting them. And I felt like if I went faster, it was probably just going to buck and roll us over.
Or break something, yeah.
Right. So we ran that section several times, and I said,
This
let's
is
go
enough,
get one
yeah.
with the new Blackhawks
Right.
and go see the difference.
Right.
That's
Which
what we
was
did.
great.
So you switched out cars, and
Yep.
And
did
so,
you switch drivers now, or is
No.
Nicole
No,
still driving?
we switched.
Okay.
Well, this one was cool because it was really back to back because it was a stock rental XP 1000
Mm-hmm.
Razor, which is like that vehicle's like the most popular.
Recreational.
Well, it's like the most
It's
sold.
good entry level, most sold, really popular.
Yeah.
Right.
It's the most applicable to everybody.
Right.
But what's interesting, like so that's like, it's a 100 horsepower vehicle. Now the cars are 200 horsepower. They've got like another 10 inches of wheel travel, better shocks and all that. But I feel like people have kind of forgotten about this XP 1000. But with the Bilsteins, you can roll through this section like
I was
really,
wide open.
really good.
Yeah. So the difference was, I made a few passes and I was getting to feel comfortable in those shocks. And except for like in the sections where we were turning, where it was straight, I was just flat out, wide open, floored. And it was just going through those whoops. And it was way faster. And we were not as fatigued. My glasses stayed on my nose. And you were holding on with one hand instead of death gripping with two hands.
He had a hold of the grab handle with both hands, trying to not break his teeth. He was screaming so loud.
Night and day difference, really. And it was really cool to have a back-to-back comparison like that with no other changes.
Yeah, it was great. Like same tire, it's stock vehicle. So that was fantastic. I think it had a couple whip flags. Other than that, it was basically the same car.
Right.
So are people going to comment and say the whip flags made the car drive better like they did on the mysterious camper shell that makes us 8112s go faster? Or
Hopefully not.
hopefully not. So the flags had nothing to do with the way the car drove, I'm guessing.
It was fun, though.
You were flat-footing it through that whole section.
Yeah.
And probably going at least, if I was to guess, 20 miles per hour faster.
Yeah.
Over some gigantic
Were you
whoops.
scared at any point? Come on.
A little bit.
Yeah.
A little bit.
Shane doesn't get scared easy, so she must have been driving like a bat out of
Well,
hell.
I mean, I know that this car's got I think they have 16 inches of travel. But,
Like,
it
that's
went.
a mighty big bump.
I got out and made an adjustment to the front, and that made it a lot better. So the Blackhawk shocks have 4 adjustments. I did a high-speed compression, added 3 clicks, and I felt that was pretty damn good. And then Garrett's like, I need to get a shot. Like, go down over these whoops and come back. And I'm like, we haven't even done those whoops yet. And Nicole's just
practice
gone, like in it.
Zoom, see you later.
It was fun. And I haven't actually driven a lot of UTVs. About 4 years ago, I was on a Polaris shoot with Polaris up in Idaho for some commercial stuff that they were doing. And prior to that, I'd never driven one. So that's like my second day driving a UTV, just so you know. I have other experiences, but hey, I want to drive everything.
Yeah. You didn't get a chance to make a test run with the Boxster, so you just went right into the UTV at that point.
But I think a lot of the things I'm learning at the track, to be honest, is applicable in other forms of driving too.
Absolutely. Yep.
When and where you would brake and when and how you would get out of back into the throttle. It applies in many situations.
Yeah, we hear that from a lot of race car drivers that really doesn't matter the form of motorsports. The technique is essentially always the same.
Technique on the track, try not to waste time.
Yep.
Like you're always trying, you're really focused on time around the track, where off-road, they really don't do that.
Right.
We're learning to keep the car balanced because, under hard acceleration, right, the vehicle will squat.
Yep.
And the nose gets light, which means you don't have a lot of tire contact patch and you have less ability to steer. And you can only ask your car to do a total of 100% of braking, accelerating, decelerating, or steering. And so when you are hard accelerating, you cannot possibly expect your car to steer 100%, right? You can only do so much. So you are constantly trying to balance, if I'm braking, how much am I braking that I can still do a steer? Like, can I trail brake going into this turn?
Right.
And you're modulating your gas, your brake, keeping the car as balanced as possible and understanding what happens when it nosedives and how the contact patch of your tire changes. So I think a lot of that stuff, no, it's not as applicable blasting through whoops, but the idea of being smooth and balanced still translates.
Oh yeah.
The feel of the car and the knowledge of the chassis is going to be what gets you through it. I mean, all the stuff that you learned in the King of the Hammers stuff and the monster trucks, not to mention that all the track stuff is all going to apply. All those techniques are going to apply to driving the side-by-side as well.
And the other thing, when you say the King of the Hammers and the monster trucks and the boxer stuff, 100% of it is trusting your equipment. If you know your vehicle was designed to do a certain thing, then go do that certain thing.
Right.
The thing that most people are afraid of is they may or may not believe that the vehicle can do that. So once you understand, like, hey, I've got the right safety equipment, I've got the cage, the shocks can do it, the vehicle can do it, it has enough power, all the things that go into play, then that eliminates a lot of the fear that would be based around driving.
Yeah, and like you said, just the experience or your confidence level as you build it, right? You build it from, like Shane said, you do a pass at X miles an hour and that felt good. Let's see if we can go faster. Let's do a pass. Yeah. So we got a little note here from Garrett, the director.
Is he saying wrap it
Top
up?
3 cars on Detour?
Oh, my top 3 cars on Detour. Well, let me just, if I can, go back and explain the format of our show.
Okay.
So we're traveling around. We do a lot of SoCal just regionally because of where we're based. And when funds permit, we'll tackle the whole world. Think Anthony Bourdain's No Reservation meets UK Top Gear. That's kind of the guiding idea for us. But we're always at a new location. We walk around this car. We're going to talk some tech so the viewer really gets to know the car and the build and the why behind the car. And then I'm going to go out and drive it and experience it and bring that viewer along vicariously. So a lot of people are like, man, I feel like I was right in the car with you. That's because we have a really good producer and editor who knows how to make the viewer feel that way. But I am always asked, what are the top 3 cars? So I have to tell you. The one that we haven't released yet, that BMW 2002, I left that experience going, this is probably my new favorite. I had so much fun in that vehicle. It's probably my new favorite car to drive. I had no idea that I was going to feel that way. So everybody's got to wait for that episode to come out. Obviously, the Porsche was really influential for my own choices in buying a 911. But I have to say, as far as special, you cannot beat the experience of driving a Shelby Cobra. Because you know that it is so rare of an experience, and you know that there is just something that is just so, pinch me, am I dreaming about that kind of thing. When I was driving at Willow Springs, I got to drive a 1 of 5 FIA Cobra.
Yeah, sub-real, yeah.
I mean, if you've watched Ford versus Ferrari, you'll recall in the movie, he's like hammering the trunk to fit a suitcase because the rules of the GT class were that it had to have a suitcase of a certain size fit in the trunk. So if you recall that moment in the movie, that actually happened in real life. Ken Miles didn't do it, but in real life, they were actually, reshaping the trunks to fit a suitcase. There were 5 cars that Carroll Shelby built to go race the GT class. I got to drive one of those at Willow Springs.
Amazing.
Yeah,
Right. That was the one with the 427 Cobra Jet motor in it? Or
No, it was a 289.
Okay.
Those were all 289s. And I got to drive it on the track, and Lynn says to me as I'm pulling out, you can imagine you're Ken Miles right now. And so the whole time, I was driving solo on the track, and of course I'm not driving that car at 10/10ths. You would not. It's multiple millions of dollars.
Right.
You cannot, and you would not. I'm just there to experience
light driving.
Light driving. And I'm driving around the track the whole time going, remember this moment, remember this moment. And I can still see in my mind coming out of turn 6, shifting up and just flooring it. Going into the next turn going, wow, remember this moment.
Yeah.
Remember this moment because this is super unique. So that's probably on my top list of special, wouldn't want to drive it every day. My hair would be very mad, roadster style, blowing all over the place. So it's not I wouldn't say it's my favorite car to drive. It's my favorite experience I've ever had.
Right.
Also, I like weird things like driving a Haglins. Do you know what that is?
Haglins. No. Explain that one to me.
So it's like this Swedish military personnel carrier that is on tracks. And it's got a trailer that's powered also on tracks, and it holds 17 people, and you can stuff it in a ditch and drive over everything.
Oh.
That was super cool
Yeah, that
too.
sounds really, really fun. Tracked vehicles can be pretty fun to drive.
Yeah.
That's the one where you drive with levers, right? Or did it have a steering
No,
wheel?
this one didn't have levers, but
Okay.
like fat trucks and stuff do. But
Right.
yeah, it was, but I just like off-road still, you know? And so if you can get me on some gnarly terrain, I love it. I mean, we're literally, this thing is enormous and you can fit, again, 17 people in it and there's a trailer and you could go down into the deepest ditch possible. We're never going to get out of it.
Drives right
And the
up,
trailer
pulling
is
the
meanwhile
trailer. Yeah.
going down and it's crossed up and it just drives right out of it. And you're like, there's no way.
Yeah, that's pretty amazing.
How cool is that?
Where did we even find this vehicle? Is it?
Yeah.
It was in Wyoming.
Was it
We
really?
went to Casper, Wyoming to find this vehicle.
Is it like a imported car or vehicle?
Oh yeah,
Or-
I mean
okay.
they're from Europe and they
Yeah.
use them a lot for search and rescue
Okay.
now. So they were old military vehicles that are now for search and rescue, and they go up in the snow and they go everywhere.
So they're pretty heavily imported into the United States?
No,
Or
you have to be a weirdo to want one.
It's like the only one in the U.S.
But a lot of like you'll literally like go up to Canada or some of these mountainous areas and find that the search and rescue teams will use these vehicles.
Nice.
So I just found this guy, online and reached out to him. I was like, I want to drive one of those. Okay. So we went up to Casper, Wyoming, and it was hot. It was the middle of summer. We weren't in the snow, to experience that, but it was so cool.
And it became an episode on Detour.
Oh yeah, we have 500,000 views on it. Yeah, and it has
pretty
impacted his sales. He's had people reach out and go, "I saw that video.
Yeah.
I want one."
Get me one.
Yeah.
Talk to
So
the
if you have
guys
a
in Sweden.
remote cabin up in the woods somewhere,
Right.
which he does, it's his personal Haglins, and he'll drive it out to his remote cabin up in the woods somewhere in the middle of winter.
That is
really
so
cool.
cool. Yeah.
Yeah.
Well, so one last question. So with Detour going forward, can you give us any little insights that we might be looking at your site to find for the next vehicles that you're looking at going for, or the next big thing? What's the next big thing for
The
Detour?
next big thing. We only produce one video a month at the fastest because we have a small crew and we're passionate about these cars. So we're really particular about, we spend a portion of our time scouting vehicles, and there's a month in editing in every single 100 to 160 hours in post-production editing, because we do real color grading and audio mix, and it's a professional show run by just a handful of people here.
Right.
So I don't have months and months and months planned out in
Right,
advance.
right.
If we find something, we're filming it and you're seeing it
Right.
in about a month.
Right.
So you'll see those BMWs in about a month. And I don't know what our next Detour will be. Your guess is as good as mine.
We'll know when you know, right?
I want to just drive everything. I'm looking for weird, cool things to go drive.
Is there
Well-
anything on the agenda that you can share with us that's coming up that you've
On the
looking
agenda.
forward to?
Well, one thing that I do, and I'll give them a little shout out that nobody really knows about, is I work with a nonprofit called Brakes. And that stands for Be Responsible and Keep Everyone Safe. Doug Herbert is a drag racer. And in 2008, his two sons were killed in a car accident when his older son was just driving dumb. And so he decided to do something about it. He started a nonprofit. And now we teach kids, newer drivers, proactive driving skills. We put them in we throw them into a skid. How do you recover from that? We've got skid rings on the tires. We have them get into the ABS braking and learn how to control and steer the car. We have them do some slaloms and crash avoidance stuff and how to high-speed kind of lane maneuver. So I've been working with this organization now for a little while. And so a lot of what I'm doing is actually going, on Friday, I go to Raleigh, North Carolina to do the brakes program. So I'm an instructor for these youth who are learning how to
Sounds really
drive
cool.
better. And honestly,
Yeah.
check it out. Putonthebrakes.org is a great organization, and there's nothing much in it for me, but I like to do it because I like working with the youth, and I feel like it's a good way to kind of give back and do some service too. So for me, that is something that also occupies my time,
Yeah.
but I'm happy to be associated
I
with
have
them.
a few friends that would have survived high school had they actually gone and done something like that. But we had to learn the hard way, when we were kids, go drive on snow and ice and end up in the ditch. And so I'm really appreciative that somebody's taken the time to prevent kids from having that issue or having to learn the hard way, which could cost you your life if you're not paying attention.
They have graduated 130,000 students out of this program since 2008 when they started it. And they have found that kids that graduate from this program are like 62%, can't remember the exact percentage, less likely to get into a car accident after going through the brakes
Do
program.
you teach them how to turn the radio down?
Yeah, well, we actually talked to them about distracted driving. We put drunk goggles on them. We throw things at them.
Nice.
We put a calculator in their hand and tell them to, like, simulating a cell phone and see how good you can drive when you're distracted.
Yeah.
So yes, we're actually doing things like that to
so cool.
sink in that you cannot be doing those things.
Yeah.
And they all go into it. Their parents dragging them there. They're like, why am I here? I don't need this. These are kids that either have a license or at least 30 hours on a permit. It's not driver's ed. It's the next step.
Right.
They go into it grouchy and they all come out like smiling, laughing, having a great time and learning something and telling their friends about it.
Yeah.
It's really cool.
That's awesome.
Yeah.
So are they based on the East Coast or is this nationwide?
Yeah, they're based in North Carolina, but we have 3 fleets of cars that Kia has donated. So we have 22 cars in Southern California, 22 in the Midwest, and 22 on the East Coast. And we travel. We're able to put on shows all over the place. So I'm going to go to Raleigh, North Carolina, and then the following week I'll be up at Laguna Seca, up in the Monterey area teaching. So it's really cool. They're all over the place. So again, just a little shout out to putonthebrakes.org. It's a great program. I'm just in it to kind of give back a little bit.
Sounds awesome.
Yeah, I have one last question. You mentioned you had a vehicle that we debate a lot earlier in the podcast. One's 4Runner, the other one is YJs. And what's better, a YJ with a spring under or spring over? So was your YJ that you had?
So my YJ was like cut up a lot. It pretty much just had the frame rails and stuff. It was still big and boxy and didn't perform all that well. But a 4Runner, now I had an FJ Cruiser and I've had FJ40s and stuff. I've actually not had a 4Runner.
But was your YJ spring over or spring under?
It was over. So
very good.
Yeah. It was it did not perform as well as I wanted it to. That's why we got rid of it.
That's a YJ.
That's why we got rid of it. Yeah.
Yeah, this is a constant debate for us here on podcast internally. So you have 2 boys.
2 boys, yep. They are 24 and 26, both recently graduated from college. So we've got that part checked off, which is why we're playing with Porsches now. We are free to play with Porsches. And they're good kids. My youngest son graduated with broadcast journalism degree, and my youngest son has won an Emmy for a student project and an Edward R. Murrow, which is a big deal, the highest journalism award you can get. He works with us on the show. It's probably why we are so good at the show,
It must be.
And my oldest is a computer science major, but they're really good boys. And the cool thing about doing really weird things as a mom, raising these boys, is that I always got to point out to them how cool I was.
Coolest mom on the block.
Oh, they were so embarrassed by me. I'm like, I'm the coolest mom on the planet. I was always reminding them of that. And, one time I remember we were going through a drive-through at McDonald's, and I scrub the curb or kind of hit the curb a little bit. Kind of sometimes those drive-thrus are narrow, and my boy would be like, "What are you practicing for rock crawling, Mom?" And, and I always thought maybe they were embarrassed, as kids would get, around junior high school age. And I dropped my son off at the bus stop one day, and a boy I didn't know had said to me, "Hey, good luck at Monster Jam this weekend." And I thought,
they saw you.
No, it means my boy is chatting me up to his friends.
Right.
Okay, yeah. I am cool.
Yeah.
So it was hey, you can't sit here and pretend you don't like me. Yeah. I know you're telling your friends about me.
Well, how many boys get to grow up with a mom who's a monster truck driver? That's, to me, that would have been a total dream come true. So
crazy.
Yeah.
Yeah. Somehow they're still normal.
Yeah. They came out normal.
They're normal.
After all that.
They're still normal. Yep.
Did they follow along in the automotive passion?
I think they really do like cars, but they're not as heavy into it as we are. It's not that they don't like cars. They like them. But, I think also with age comes maybe a little bit more finances to get into cars.
Right.
My youngest wants an old, like a 70s Corvette, but he also wants some weird, Delica, like a Mitsubishi Delica that he can go rock climbing in and stuff. And so the other day when I was in Newport, Rhode Island at the Audrain Concours, I saw a Corvette Sport Wagon. Do you know what that is?
No.
It's a Corvette with a camper shell.
Oh my gosh.
They made them for a while. It's the dumbest thing, but it solves all of these problems. I was like, oh my gosh.
Like an El Camino.
I said to my son, I was like, look, here's your 70s Corvette, and you can throw your rock climbing gear in it.
Exactly.
This is what you need, a Corvette Sport Wagon. They're hideous.
Yeah.
It's the stupidest thing I've ever
I've
seen.
seen pictures of them, but I've never seen one in real life.
Saw it in real life. But, you know, if you have a dilemma, like, oh,
Yeah.
I got to get to Costco fast
Yeah.
and haul all my stuff home, there you go.
Yeah,
That's
the
car.
Corvette didn't have a trunk, so or not much of one. So.
It has a camper shell on it. It's crazy.
There it
So-
is. Garrett's got a photo. up.
Isn't that the ugliest
That
thing you've
is
ever
just
seen?
rad.
crazy.
Yeah.
That's actually
I
pretty
saw one
cool.
of these in Car Week.
Yeah.
Right. Yep.
They're weird. But again, you imagine if you have the dilemma of hauling stuff fast, you can do that.
Kind of
So
looks
weird.
like the car from the Munster show or
Right.
something. It's just really weird looking.
Ugly. It was for sale for like $50,000. I thought,
Yeah.
would you really go spend
Yeah, there
$50,000
can't be
on
that many of those in the world. They couldn't have been very popular. Oh my gosh, that is
Yes.
just
Look at that
is
profile.
hideous.
Hideous.
Talk
But I-
about clown shoe. I mean, that is just very clown shoey. But
But
oh,
that's
it's
the
crazy.
car my son needs because he can do both.
Yeah,
Yeah. He can go do everything in that car.
He needs to save his pennies.
Right.
exactly.
Right.
$50,000.
50K for a very, very unique car.
Mm-hmm.
Well, I guess we're going to try to wrap it up here unless anybody's got anything else going. We really want to thank you for coming on with us today. It was very amazing to hear about your life and all the things that you've done. I've been looking forward to this episode since I heard you were coming. Just really happy to have you on. And folks, if you have any comments or you need any additional information on Nicole's show, please just tag us there in the comment section. And we'll see you again soon on Shock Talk.
Thank you so much for having me.
Thank you.
It was a great experience.